Hello. Hi, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Hello, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Hi, Meryl. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Gary?
I'm good. It's
Good.
almost February 15th. The baseball's coming soon.
I gotta wait a little while here. I can hear it from my house, spring training. It's nice that it's so close. I can ride my bike up there and I don't have to pay for parking.
There you go.
That's very nice. It's a nice perk.
Yeah, for what the tickets have gone up to. It's,
Yeah, I'm sure it's
Yeah,
crazy.
my
$10 is
Dodgers-
$10.
My Dodger seats are $100 a ticket now.
Oh, our Diamondbacks tickets are, I think they're $60 a ticket.
Wow.
But we have such premium seats, will never change.
But it's always free to go to shul and daven with the rabbi, so.
Oh, yeah, very free.
Torah studies free too, right?
Exactly.
All of these things are very free, especially when you belong to multiple congregations.
That's the truth.
You get more than you give.
I get so much and it's not enough, if you know what I mean. I could never give up Wilshire, and our new temple here, not so new, but new to us over the last year, is amazing. So I do get my fill.
At some point, we need to get this whole group, including you, Merle, even from out of town, together in person. I feel
I'll
like
come, no
that's gotta
problem. I
happen.
go back and
Yeah.
forth for stuff.
I mean,
I'll be there the end of January.
Trying to remember, I wasn't here so long before the pandemic started. I don't know if there was a Friday Torah study at noon before the pandemic or not. Was there?
Yeah, in person, lunch and
It
learn.
was. Every Friday?
I don't remember. I know that when my mother was still alive, even the caregiver took her. Steve led it, Rabbi Leader.
Yeah,
And
once a month, Rabbi Leader had one at CAA.
Yeah.
I went
Right,
to
I
see
remember
it
that.
a number of times.
But there wasn't
and
a
in
week.
times before that, it was, well, I guess it was once a month.
CAA was good, but the $30 parking was a little stingy.
Nothing is free, Gary.
So I guess it was the pandemic that led to the once a week, the weekly Torah study.
I
right?
think so.
So that means that this group has only really spent time together online and not in person. So anyway, we'll have to think about that. Maybe we'll have to figure out how to find a way.
All right, well, I'll be there the
something
last
like this.
weekend in January.
Yeah, and the Saturday morning one met in person until the COVID hit.
Right.
Right, with Rabbi David's, right?
Yeah.
That was, yes. Yep. And then, but now that's strictly online. It's not back
For
in
now.
Right. for now.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hi, everyone. We'll get started. So I'm going to give you both the link to a version either online, and then I will also include a PDF version so that you can have that as well. Again, as I always say, I never get to everything that I want to during our time together. So there's more material here. And of course, I mean, this Torah portion we could spend a month just on this Torah portion. So we'll begin with the blessing for engaging in the study of Torah, and then we'll dive right in. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who commands us to engage in the study of Torah. Okay, this is a great one, full of so much material that I had to try and narrow it down to two elements, because this, I mean, we're not even going to cover this today really in the study itself, but I really do urge you to go and read this whole Torah portion in its entirety, because really this is the source of one of the most important values that I believe exists in our tradition, which is questioning, which is arguing, right? This is where Abraham really does put God to the test, so to speak, different from at the end of the Torah portion. But this is the great, debates that Abraham has with God about whether or not to destroy the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah. This, of course, is the Torah portion. There are only a couple that we read twice a year, and this is one of them, because at the end of this Torah portion, of course, we have the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, the sacrifice of Isaac, which we'll get to. Hopefully, we'll get to some of that and really want to open it up to your interpretations of that. So this is a very special and important Torah portion. And again, because of all the different elements, there's no way we're going to cover it all. But when I was studying in preparation for today, I was struck by a certain element of the story that I hadn't really spent a lot of time focusing on before. That's, of course, the beauty of studying Torah, is that every year you find something new to study and to engage with. And there was a section and some rabbinic interpretations about the people of Sodom that I wanted to focus on. So that's what we're going to do in the first part, and then we'll get to the binding of Isaac. I didn't want to really focus as much today on Abraham's negotiation with God. That is very important. Next year we could spend time on that. But really, again, want to focus on this idea of Sodom and what's going on there. So figure we will review the story first, and then we'll go into the rabbinic interpretations of it. Okay. The beginning of the idea of Sodom and Gomorrah comes in chapter 18 of Genesis, where God then Adonai said, the outrage of Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so grave, I will go down to see whether they have acted altogether according to the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will take note. Okay, so that happens towards the beginning of the Torah portion. After the beginning, the very, very beginning of the Torah portion is Abraham's recovery from his circumcision, his self-inflicted circumcision, and the source of this idea of hachnasat orchim, of welcoming the guests, of bringing people in, right? It's the idea, the chuppah comes from the beginning of this Torah portion, the idea that Abraham, despite his challenging physical experience at the moment, he goes out and he greets those guests and he brings them in, and he and Sarah feed them food. And it's this idea of the importance of welcoming the stranger, right? And so that's part one of the Torah portion. Then we get into this part where God makes this statement. And then we have what comes right after that, which I cut out, is the negotiation that Abraham has with God about whether or not to destroy the town based on the number of people. If you find 50, righteous people, if you feel all the way down to 10, and God says, okay, fine, 10 righteous people, I'll spare the cities. But then right after that, after God says, okay, I'll spare them if they're 10, then we have this part, okay, which usually is the focus of why God decides to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. It's because of this section. But this section, I think, on the surface seems to indicate a certain reason why the Sodomites are to be destroyed, but the rabbis actually don't focus on that as much, and they take a different tack. So I wanted us to see what they had to say about it. So first, let's read it, though, just to kind of refresh ourselves. The two messengers arrived in Sodom. Now, these messengers are angels of God. In the evening, as Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. Just a review from before, Lot and Abraham in last week's Torah portion decide to go separate ways. They had journeyed together to the new land, and Abraham and Lot decide to, go to different plots of land, and Lot decides on this area. And so he settled in the town of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to greet them, and bowing low with his face to the ground, he said, "Please, my lords, turn aside to your servant's house to spend the night and bathe your feet, then you may be on your way early." But they said, "No, we will spend the night in the square." But he urged them strongly, so they turned his way and entered his house. So it's almost as though he kind of has a sense of, either he has a sense of what these people are like, or he really just wants to be a good host and have them come and stay with him. He prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. Okay, so already we have a little bit of a parallel between Lot and Abraham, this idea that, okay, he's also welcoming the strangers. They had not yet lain down when the town council and the militia of Sodom, insignificant and influential alike, The whole assembly, without exception, gathered about the house. And they shouted to Lot and said to him, "Where are the ones who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may be intimate with them." So Lot went out to them to the entrance, shut the door behind him, and said, "I beg you, my friends, do not commit such a wrong. Look, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you may do to them as you please, but do not do anything to the others, since they have come under the shelter of my roof." All right, a big no-no. Like this is pretty terrible, of course, of Lot. He's saying, "No, I'm not going to give you these strangers for you to have, sexual relations with. Instead, I'm going to give you my virgin daughters, and you can do whatever the heck you want with them, but take them and leave these other strangers alone." Okay. But they said, "Stand back. The fellow," they said, "came here as an alien, and already he acts the ruler," meaning Lot. "Now we will deal worse with you than with them." And they pressed hard against that householder, against Lot, and moved forward to break the door. But the agents, meaning the angels, stretched out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And the people who were at the entrance of the house, low and high alike, they struck with blinding light so that they were helpless to find the entrance. Then the agents said to Lot, "Whom else have you here? Sons-in-law, your sons and daughters, or anyone else that you have in the city? Bring them out of the place. For we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against them before Adonai has become so great that Adonai has sent us to destroy it." Okay, so based on this story so far, what is the reason why God would want to destroy these towns? What's going on with the way these people, these Sodomites are acting that is leading God to want to destroy the towns?
They wanted to rape the angels.
Yep, they wanted to rape the angels. They wanted to destroy. I mean, at once Lot wanted to give over his daughters instead of those. They weren't going to even just take his daughters. There was this idea that these people wanted to be to violate the strangers, right, and to dominate them and to overpower them and to abuse them. That seems to be a clear indicator that these people are pretty terrible and that God would want to destroy them. Any other additions to that? Anything else in the story that would add to that? Yeah, Brad, and then Merle, and then Susan.
Well, I wonder if this isn't about the hospitality code and the importance of the hospitality code in the ancient world, that these were extreme violations of the hospitality code and therefore had to be punished.
Okay, so less to do with the sexual violation and more to do with the fact that there is a hospitality, there's a code of how you welcome in people, and these townspeople are going completely against the code that we were just given, earlier in the Torah portion with Abraham and the way in which he welcomed the strangers. Okay, great. Merle and then Susan.
So I was going to say the same thing, but I do have a question. Is there a significance to the reason that there was unleavened bread, or it was just a time and there was no leaven?
Good question. I don't know.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. Susan.
I was going to say the same thing with the hospitality code. However, there's also a caveat with that of whom you welcome into your house. I don't think that one has to welcome Nazis into one's house. These were angels, so that's pretty self-evident. To me, the most striking thing is Lot himself, of his, and also the townspeople. These people were deserving of being annihilated, even though Abraham said that there's one just person within it. There's been an argument that how can one just person, Noah aside, I guess, survive in a hostile society? On the one hand, you hope that that person will be strong enough there'll be a Martin Luther King or others or Moses to lead people out of the hostile society. But on the other hand, it's very hard to live in a society. And this society showed itself to be incorrigible and horrible, and what's abhorrent to God too is sexually raping people. I mean, that's always a kind of introduction to idolatry too, which they probably were. So I mean, this is probably the epitome of a society that deserves to be wiped out.
Okay, thank
I
you.
mean, that's not a very PC thing to say today, but I mean, a Nazi society, yes, I mean, there were innocents killed, but there were innocent Americans too to try and Brits and others.
Yeah. And I mean, let's be honest, the Torah is not PC, so it's okay for us to not have to necessarily think that the Torah is PC in the way it approaches things. Rebecca and then Roy.
My question is about the messengers. My Tanakh says 2 angels. And why were 2 angels? If they were angels, aren't they kind of spiritual celestial beings? Why were they so swayed to go in the house? And why did they stay strong to go sleep out in the square? Because if they had slept in the square, maybe none of this would have happened. So were they actually angels, messengers? Were they devils? What were they? Who are the messengers?
I think the idea is that they are angels of God, that they are messengers of God, agents, so to speak, of God, that in a way, similar to, I guess, one of the other themes of this Torah portion is the idea of tests. We can really see that throughout the Torah portion. There are many tests. It's only at the very end that God declares something to be a test, or that the Torah declares that God put Abraham to the test. But there are these testing moments throughout this Torah portion, I'd say from the very beginning, right? Even from the start of when Abraham is right there and these angels, 3 angels are coming towards him, that he's put to the test of how do you welcome people, even when you're in a state of pain, right? And that he goes out and so there's test 1, and then it's as though here these angels are going into the town to test whether or not God should go along with the negotiation that he had with Abraham, which was, if there are 10 good people, okay, I'm going to save these towns. But they had to go in to kind of do on the ground research to see what it was like, right? To go from beyond the hypothetical of what a town and who makes up a group of people to really seeing in their face, how are people acting, right? Because if anything, I think it's a nice reminder of the idea of the public persona versus the private persona, or the outward appearance, or the outward, the way in which a society or a group of people or even an individual is assumed to be on the outside, and are they mirrored on their actions and who they are and their values publicly and privately. It's almost as though the angels are sent to the towns to figure out the reputation of the town. Is that a correct reputation or not? And it turns out that it was an appropriate reputation. Roy and then Brad.
I have a question for others to offer their thoughts. It has to do what Lot didn't do. So Lot offered his daughters as a substitute for the guests. Why did it for them to be violated and made impure? But why didn't Lot just say, not offer a substitute, but just tell the townspeople that they're violating the hospitality code and that he was not going to surrender them?
Great question. Anyone? I know Brad and Cindy had their hands up, but I think it was before Roy posed his question. So anyone have an immediate response first to Roy's question, and then we'll, go ahead, Susan.
Lot was evil. That's why he didn't take and these people were barging in and pressing them. Yes, Lot invited the strangers into his house, so he knew that hospitality. But in a scene before, we don't have a lot of Lot, but in the scene just before this, which you mentioned, Rabbi, that they were deciding on, they were going to separate because the herdsmen were fighting with each other. And Abraham offers Lot the first choice of which area to settle. And Lot chooses Sodom because apparently he feels it's a better land, disregarding the inhabitants of Sodom, who were absolutely evil and awful. So, and some rabbis have pointed that out. So that shows his concern for prosperity versus morality. So I would say that was in Lot's character, and you don't. what were they, the saying is that you don't go before a raging bull and say, you know, I'm a vegetarian. So and these were raging bulls. So
Nice.
anyway, that's my response to Roy.
Like that. Roy, what is your thought?
Well, I didn't review the passage before, so Susan's explanation makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's, I'm still working on the higher levels of understanding the various Torah passages, and so, but I did note is what was absent in at least the passage that you presented, and that he offered his daughters as a substitute rather than just absolutely saying to them no. So.
Yeah. From a literary perspective, I think Lot's response is in contrast to Abraham's negotiation with God, which again, I didn't put on the sheet, but comes right before this. So really, I think it's a way similar to what Susan was saying, what happens earlier between Abraham and Lot, where they go their separate ways and Lot chooses land based on prosperity and doesn't actually care about Abraham at all. He just wants the most for himself. That again, here is a moral contrast between Abraham's approach to difficult situations to the stranger versus Lot's, right? And Lot's attempt not to try and save and not even to really speak up with moral courage, but instead to figure out a way where he could try and appease the enemy, so to speak, or appease the people who are immoral by giving up something of himself, which in fact is a true sign of weakness, as opposed to moral courage of standing up and saying, as Roy, you pointed out, why didn't he just say, no, this is against the way we are supposed to act. Instead, he acts in the way he does. Okay, Brad, Cindy, Penina.
Rabbi, I'm picking up on your comment about the test. And of course, this passage is filled with tests. I just finished rereading the Odyssey. The second half of the Odyssey is one test after another. The test or skepticism was essential in the ancient world. And where have we come with respect to the test? Where's our skepticism today? Look at the fake news that's out there, and how is it that skepticism is no longer part of our DNA? What's happened? Excuse me, I'm maybe getting off point, but you brought up the test, and it is essential in this parsha.
Yes, and I think you're actually getting to some of the rabbinic commentaries that we're not at yet, and I think we'll maybe be addressing some of those points, Brad. And in terms of skepticism and tests, I'd say we're still extremely skeptical and pessimistic in today's world. Maybe it's just that we're not looking for it as a test in order to improve ourselves, but more as an opportunity for us to just see the horrible nature of other people's actions and not necessarily seeing it as an opportunity, right? I think the tests in the Torah are really supposed to be teaching us, of course, what not to do in order, or in sometimes what to do in order to try and improve ourselves and improve the world and making it a more meaningful, values-based society. And so whether or not we see today's tests and that's today in that same light, is a really good question that maybe we'll continue to explore as we start to look at how the rabbis are seeing this and basically what some of their societal feelings are and what they're trying to push us towards. Okay, Cindy, and then Penina.
Okay, I'm just trying to put the pieces together in my mind that Lot offers his two virgin daughters to be raped. Are these the same two daughters who later get their father drunk and in essence rape him?
Yes. Yeah. We didn't see, again, there's so much in this Torah portion. That's another great, really hidden story that no one ever talks about, but they should, because it's extremely disturbing. And yes, these are the same. Yeah. Cindy, do you feel as though there is a connection there? Do you feel like that's supposed to be teaching us something?
Well, he offers them to be raped, and then they turn around, get him drunk and rape him. I
So-
don't know what the meaning is, but it's
Yeah.
more than a coincidence.
Yes, yes. Great. Thank you. Penina. Oh, you're muted. Hold on. Penina.
Penina, you're muted.
Okay,
There you go.
now, okay, all right. So we have to understand that when Abraham starting this whole new feelings or new deductions came as a result of him coming from a place that all those rituals were acceptable. They were a part of showing devotion to the gods, to the idols. There was a big influence of Egypt also, of what was going on in Egypt at the time. And that religious picture that we saw there, this is what you see in Sodom and Gomorrah. There was a big influence there from all the countries around Abraham, all the pieces of land behind. So what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah was a picture of devotion to those gods that believe in human sacrifices and so forth. And the maidens were chosen to be sacrificed to the gods, and all those rituals, even the sex, was a part of rituals, religious rituals. So the whole idea of Abraham now has to all of a sudden come up with this thing that all this is not acceptable. It's a process. They're showing you that this whole area went through a process, and Abraham was the one that the Bible is telling us, that one person that realized that that isn't what life should be like. No slavery and all this social justice that later on Moses puts into the Ten Commandments. It's no wonder that Abraham was the first to decide that this is not working. And him trying to sacrifice his son, it was also the seesaw back and forth. Is that what really God wants?
Okay, so don't get ahead. We're going to get to that later.
So what I'm trying to say, that it's all connected. The whole idea of this whole religious thing that we see that developed later on from Abraham behaviors and Abraham wanting to be, it was to do something that's totally different than what he saw when he was growing up.
Yep. Great. Yeah.
Came from a place that all this was holy, something that you should do. And then the whole idea is, and they were very simple people.
Okay, yeah, good.
Winemakers.
We're going to go on, Penina. Yeah. Hold on. So yes, you're making a good point, which is that this is about differentiating Abraham and his descendants from everyone else.
The other religions, exactly.
Right. Good. Okay, so let's go. I want to make sure we can keep going through some of these rabbinic interpretations so that we can hopefully even get to the binding of Isaac. So Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer says, Rabbi Yehuda said, and now this is in response to what's going on in the story of these angels and how people are acting in Sodom. They made a proclamation in Sodom saying, everyone who strengthens the hand of the poor or the needy with a loaf of bread shall be burnt by fire. Okay. So this rabbi is suggesting that one of the things that made Sodom and Gomorrah so bad was not what the things that we actually just talked about, but really, and of course, there's no textual support for this in the Torah itself per se, but this is again the rabbis trying to really figure out, well, what's the real source of what made Sodom, the people of Sodom, so bad? That according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's that any time someone in that town reached out to try and help the poor or the needy and give them a loaf of bread, that person who tried to help someone else would burn by fire, right? They'd burn them at the stake. So Peletit, daughter of Lot, was wedded to one of the magnates of Sodom. She saw a certain very poor man in the street of the city, and her soul was grieved on his account. As it is said, was not my soul grieved for the needy? What did she do? Every day, when she went out to draw water, she put in her bucket all sorts of provisions from her home, and she fed that poor man. The men of Sodom said, how does this poor man live? When they ascertained the facts, they brought her forth to be burnt with fire. And she said, sovereign of all worlds, maintain my right and my cause at the hands of the men of Sodom. And her cry ascended before the throne of glory. In that hour, the Holy One, blessed be he, said, I will now descend and I will see, right? This is their callback. This is where the rabbis are drawing a connection between the story they're making up and what we saw up here. I will go down to see whether they have acted altogether. Okay, that's the connection that's being made there. Whether the men of Sodom have done according to the cry of this young woman. I will turn her foundations upwards, and the surface thereof shall be turned downwards. As it is said, I will now descend, and I will see whether they have done altogether according to her cry, which is come unto me. According to their cry is not written here in the text, only according to her cry. And they're referring to this. In the Hebrew here, it's not the outcry of them, meaning plural, it's her cry, right? So the rabbis here, interestingly enough, are saying the reason why God actually decides to go and destroy the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah has nothing to do with Lot, has nothing to do with actually what happens when all of those townspeople come in front of his house trying to rape his daughters or rape the angels. In fact, it goes much deeper into the societal problems of this town. And the societal problems of this town, and this is why this is their rabbi's critique of society itself, is that societies and towns where they do not strengthen the hand of the poor or the needy, where they, instead of caring for the stranger, do the actual opposite and look down on those who spend their time caring for the poor and the needy, that's what deserves to be, that's why this town deserves to be destroyed. That this girl serves as the example of someone who, when a society doesn't see the benefit and tries to bring down the person who's caring for the poor or the widow or the orphan or the stranger, that's why this town needs to be destroyed. Okay, so that's it. So it's an interesting kind of shift away from what the traditionally on the surface we see the story being about. And the rabbis are going to what kind of Brad was starting to hint at, which are what are the societal issues underlying Sodom that we are supposed to learn about, because it could be very easy. Again, the rabbis even realize this, could be very easy for us to read this story and say, not only is it just a story, it's not real, it could never happen, but how can I relate to a town where every single person is evil and goes out and tries to rape other people? No, that isn't as realistic as a town or a society that doesn't uphold one of the most important values of our tradition, which is caring for the stranger, which is, again, very much linked into this theme of hospitality that we find throughout the Torah portion and that we find at the core of what it means to be a Jew, right? If we're already, it's almost as though it's foreshadowing what's going to happen in the book of Exodus, which is our master narrative, which is we were strangers and we left. And the Passover narrative is we were strangers in the land, and therefore we know what it's like to be a stranger, right? So this is almost like the precursor to some of the challenges that are going to be facing the Jewish people later on in our personal narrative, right? Because we're still kind of at human narrative, not necessarily specific to the Jews yet. Okay, so then, Susan, did you have your hand up about?
Yes, I have something. Just in response, I think I was glad that we saw that you shared that with us. But even so, people who are going to go rape strangers, and the people who give their daughters to others willingly, here, take her. They're probably not going to go feeding the hungry either. So, I mean, I think that, however, I want to answer Cindy's concern, because those two daughters, as she had rightfully mentioned, slept with their father. And who were the descendants of those two daughters? Moab and Ami, and one in Moab was Ruth, the great-great-great-grandmother of King David. So the question now is, how does one justify that or rationalize that this the incest actually led much down the line to Ruth and her being the ancestor of David, and similarly not to get too far afield, but Tamar and Judah. But let's just go for Ruth. So how do you think the rabbis are dealing with that?
It's a great question. One of it may be, I mean, you could see the story that we just read as a potential explanation that her righteousness, if we go back to that story really quickly,
That's
right?
what
The daughter of Lot, right? Maybe this is one rabbinic attempt to try and find that at the core, when they end up sleeping with their father, it's really from a place of really trying to do, and survive, right? It wasn't their fault, so to speak, but here is one of these daughters and look at how righteous she was, right? And so that could be one of the explanations.
And that's why I'm glad you shared it with us, because that's always in my mind, and I think that is intended further down the line.
Yeah.
Righteousness.
Yeah, great. Thank you for making that connection. Okay, let's keep going a little. Ezekiel, prophet Ezekiel, makes reference to Sodom when he says, "Only this was the sin of your sister Sodom, arrogance. She and her daughters had plenty of bread and untroubled tranquility, yet she did not support the poor and the needy." Right. So now this is Ezekiel starting to get to a different lens of why Sodom and Gomorrah was a bad place. It wasn't that they were, in this case, up here where they were literally burning people who tried to help, but that it was actually linked to this idea of being a place of plenty, of untroubled tranquility, that because of their sense of peace and calm and having everything they needed, that they didn't really care about the poor and the needy. They didn't look beyond their own needs, in other words, right? And that's going to come back up when we get a little further down. But linked to this, again, since this is a Torah portion, we don't read this whole Torah portion during the high holidays. Again, we read only the binding of Isaac, which maybe we'll get to, maybe not, the idea of tshuva during the high holidays. And there is a link here, and I'm curious what people think about the Rambam, Maimonides, and his laws of repentance says, every man should regard himself the whole year round as if he were equally balanced between innocence and guilt. And similarly, that the whole world is equally balanced between innocence and guilt. If he commits one sin, behold, he has weighted the scales to his own detriment and that of the world, and brought destruction on it. If he performs one good deed, he has weighted the scales in his own favor and that of the world's, and brought salvation. Okay. So according to Maimonides here, there is significant pressure on every single one of us on a daily basis with all of our actions, that our actions don't only impact our own future, but really do impact the future of the world, right? And this idea that we are all linked to one another, that our actions have a significant role in the world around us. And again, this is linking in this idea of Sodom and Gomorrah and this idea of this town. If all the towns, if that concept of how Sodom has set up itself were to spread, that would be the destruction of the world. And I think this is where we as modern readers can really see that we have to be very careful that we are not recreating the town of Sodom and Gomorrah in our world today, right? That I don't usually like to think about the fire and brimstone and how the world could go to hell in a handbasket, but it can sometimes feel that way. And it's as though there's a piece of this story that is supposed to be a warning to us that it's not that we're all going to be out there and violent necessarily, but it's when we have our values askewed that's where a society can slowly turn itself into a place of despair and detriment, and then can therefore impact the entire world. And the rabbis, I think, are trying to kind of get us to that place where caring about the stranger, and again, some of these very key values that are going to continue to come up in the Torah, but we're still really early in the Torah, that they're being planted as seeds right now with Sodom and Gomorrah. And the rabbis are trying to tell us all of those values that we're going to continue to hear about throughout our tradition and throughout the Torah. It all starts back here, and look at the kind of destruction that happens here. Beware of what you do in your society, how you structure your priorities, and what you put your focus on and what you are ignoring. And if you are ignoring the wrong things, that can lead to real destruction. Okay, so let's keep going. And then we'll pause for some more comments. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law. This is, by the way, right after, I know I keep going, but right after this, right? So, for we are about to destroy, when the angels say to Lot, whom else have you here? Sons-in-law, your sons and daughters, or anyone else that you have in the city, bring them out of this place. For we are about to destroy this place, because the outcry against them before Adonai has become so great that Adonai has sent us to destroy it. So right after that, we have, so Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who had married his daughters, and said, up, get out of this place, for Adonai is about to destroy the city. But he seemed to his sons-in-law as one who jests. Right? They didn't take him seriously. So a midrash comes along and says, mockery is a grievous matter, since punishment did not overtake the Sodomites until they mocked Lot, as it is said, and he seemed as one that mocked unto his son-in-laws. Said they to him, fool that you are, psalters, harps, and flutes in the city, and you say Sodom is about to be overthrown? So this midrash is saying, what the towns weren't going to be destroyed. All the stuff we just talked about wasn't really going to lead to the destruction. It was only when his son-in-laws didn't really take him seriously. And why didn't they take him seriously? Because everything is great in our city. How can our city be overthrown? What's going on? We have all the things that we really, bring us joy. We have the things that make us feel comfortable. So we're not going to be destroyed, right? Now we can take this, there's the big climate conference that's happening across the world right now. And this is basically what all those people are saying at that conference, which is, guess what? You think you're all nice and comfortable now, but if we're going to sit on our laurels and continue to have, our carbon emissions go up and up and up, well, then we are going to be destroying our world, right? So this, according to the Midrash, is what really is the destructive force. When a city, when a society, when a town, when a group of people don't even recognize their faults, don't even see, they are so blinded, they are so focused on the things that make them feel comfortable that they forget and blind themselves to all the parts of society that actually could destroy them. And that's what happens with Sodom. The people of Sodom became haughty in front of the place, only due to the goodness he showered upon them. As it is said, a land from which bread had issued forth, its place was overturned as if consumed by a fire. A place of sapphire were its stones, and dusts of gold were there. Remember, we talked about before, as Susan pointed out, Lot wanted to go to this place because of the beauty of the land, the promise that this land had of all of its riches, right? Natural riches. And now it is a path unknown, unfrequented by brigands, and unseen by the falcon's eye, untrodden by the haughty beasts, and not crossed by the lion. The people of Sodom said, since food comes out of our land, and silver and gold and precious stones and pearls all come from our land, we have no need that other people will come to us to diminish our valuables. Let us rise and prevent the wayfarers to enter our cities. The Holy One of Blessing said to them, I gave goodness to you, and you seek to forget the wayfarers from your cities. I will forget the wayfarers in your midst, and I will forget you from the world. Right? So it takes this and it goes even further. And again, back to those values that we were talking about before. It's because they feel like, well, we have everything we need. Let's keep all those foreigners away from us. Right? Again, now we get into, we could go politics. We're not going to necessarily do that today, but the rabbis are being political right here and basically saying, as soon as you close yourself off to the stranger and the foreigner, that is what's going to lead to destruction. Because they were so focused on keeping all their bounty to themselves and not wanting to share it with other people. Let's keep everyone out, keep it for ourselves. And that, according to this rabbinic understanding, is what led to destruction. And one more, and then we'll open it up for any thoughts. Nachmanides said, the Sodomites intended to prevent the entry of all strangers. So this one is linked to the one right up above. They imagined, as our rabbis maintain, that many people would come to their land on account of its fertility. They refused to share their bounty with the less fortunate. They accepted Lot on account of his wealth or out of respect for Abraham. Ezekiel similarly testifies that this was the offense. Behold, this was the iniquity of this sister Sodom. Pride, fullness of bread, and careless ease was in her hand and in her daughters. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy. The reference to their being evil and exceeding sinners to God is to the fact that they rebelled in their prosperity and persecuted the poor, as Ezekiel states, and they were haughty and committed abomination before me. Therefore, I removed them when I saw it. According to our sages, they were notorious for every kind of evil, but their fate was sealed for their persistence in not supporting the poor and the needy. They were continually guilty of this sin, and no other nation could be compared to Sodom for cruelty. Okay, so we have a variety of different interpretations here, but really, again, not so much about what is on the surface in the text about how the people surround this house and want to violate these people. It actually goes much deeper, right? That is not the source of the problems of this city. It's actually just one of the ramifications of the deeper issues here. Penina.
There is archaeologists that found proof that all those places that are mentioning in the stories or the lessons in the Torah were trading points. This is where they met to do their trades, because the area that Sodom is sitting is not a fruitful area. It's in a desert. It's like down where it's so hot, almost by the Dead Sea. That's why they said that she turned into salt. There wasn't much there that they can really grow or anything, not in those days. But I'm repeating myself, they were proven to be trading points. And that's why they brought with them all those rituals, all these people going back and forth. And by the way, today we have still a country that has slaves in it. Slavery is like a regular thing there. And one of the Commonwealth of the British, whatever you want to call it, empire. And also you see today when there is fighting, that the girls are being taken for prostitution. That's what happened in Afghanistan. And it's happening all the time. And it's not something that happened then. And we're still dealing with this today.
You're right. There's still, again, and I think this is why these stories are so universal and timeless in their application, because the themes that come out of these stories are still relevant, unfortunately, in today's world. Merle.
I was just going to say the same thing. It's all very current. It's selfishness. It's people not understanding why we have to give. I mean, look, Karsh sends out emails asking for donations or whatever. And it's not just Karsh, it's everywhere that has some sort of, I mean, social action is what we do to help people. And I mean, I've often asked our friend who owns the farm where I go buy everything every Friday morning, what do you do after you close on Sunday afternoon? He said, our trucks take all this leftover stuff that we can't save from one week to the next. We take it to the homeless areas and just drop it off for them. Or we take it to places that will accept food that's not pre-packaged or canned or whatever. But I'm like, I was thinking about Sharon's bat mitzvah, and Friday night we're having the dinner there. And we were talking about centerpieces. I said, I just want to do boxes of whatever fruit is that time of year in October. And then you can take it down to wherever you donate. Because what are we all going to do with all this fruit in our homes but people constantly need help. And I think the fact that they need help and so many people don't want to help, that's what makes this current, is that people are just selfish and nasty about it. And it's disturbing.
Yeah, either people are selfish and nasty about it, or they just ignore it because it's not about them, right? And
that too.
Right, and part of what I think the critique of the rabbis is that when a society and a group of people are only focused on whether or not their own needs are being met, and if their own needs are being met, then they're not really focused on other people. And this is trying to remind us, no, great. If your needs are met, wonderful. As Sodom, according to the rabbis, it was a fertile place. They had all the things they needed. And what was destructive was that they didn't use their resources to help the other people, right? And they were so focused on just being proud of what they had accomplished. We could look at this as from a country perspective, what we accomplished. But if we're not actually caring for the people in need, then all of those resources are really useless, according to the rabbis. Brad.
You know, each of these rabbis, the heart of their argument is one of income redistribution, which obviously speaks to us today. But my question is, was I blind when I did not see any of that when we actually read the Torah passage?
You were not blind.
Is it?
It's not there.
It's not there. It's
not overtly there. They look for little hints that allow them to expand the teaching of the story beyond what we find in the text itself. And I think because the text is both very disturbing, and they probably don't want to focus so much on the sexual elements and violence that exists there, but also I think they want, as the rabbis have throughout time, try to make it more applicable for readers across generations. And the way to apply that story across generations is to really look at what I think their main question is: what does lead to a city or a society to be destroyed, right? And sometimes the rabbis look, if we think about Tisha B'Av and the famous story that they link with Tisha B'Av with the destruction of the temples, in that case, they go to the idea of baseless hatred, of senseless hatred, of Jews hating one another, fighting with one another, infighting. So they have the reason for that destruction. So they're trying to find out here, before the Jewish communities really established on a much more societal level, that has nothing to do with Jews per se. What is a core thing that can truly destroy a city or a society? It's when they don't care for the widow, the poor, the stranger, those who don't have all the resources. And that places that feel so secure with what they have to work even harder to open up their eyes, to take off the blinders, to look around them, to drive through the neighborhood in their nice car and realize, I'm blessed to have this nice car. And what the heck am I going to do about that person who's right there on the street who has nothing? And if I'm only going to be in my bubbled little nice car and blind myself to those, that is what's going to destroy a society. And I think that's exactly what we need to be worried about today. If we are not addressing both the climate and economic and societal problems that are around us, we are going to destroy ourselves. That's what the rabbis are saying. That's what's going to happen. And it's just not going to be God who's going to come and, fire and brimstone down on the cities. We're just going to destroy ourselves. And that it's a warning. And it really is a warning. And I think it's in the same Torah portion, in my opinion, as we have the binding of Isaac, which we read on Rosh Hashanah as a reminder. Just like what we have, Sodom and Gomorrah, we don't talk about it in the high holidays, but you get the hint of it in Isaiah's Haftorah on Yom Kippur, right? So we're still almost connected to this Torah portion on both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We read the binding of Isaac, and then we have the Haftorah, which is basically saying, if you're sitting here happy with what you have, feeling good about being in the synagogue and fasting, and yet you go outside on those streets tomorrow and you're not paying your workers on time and you're not treating people right, well, then all this was useless. And that's what the rabbis are basically saying about the same story right here with Sodom and Gomorrah. Susan, and then we'll have 1 minute on Akedah before we.
Okay, it's interesting. I don't connect that to, even though you say the rabbis are. To me, the crime is so heinous. I think the question is, are there some societies that should be destroyed? That their crimes are so out of the ordinary. And we have that with I always point to the Nazis. But there are others as well that perhaps should be. Now, with some of the Romans throwing people to the gladiators and some of the cruelties that I had read about of having people suffer before they deliberately before they're killed. I think this is on the surface is dealing with this heinous crime in the society that produced it. And I think there are a lot of other passages that deal with feeding the poor and the hungry, taking care of the orphan and the widow and the stranger. They are constantly in the Torah, and there are examples of it. But I think that this has to be this story. And what are the ramifications of this story? And I get it for the rabbi's quote, the Mishnah that you quoted there about the girl then. So maybe the girls were innocent and they were being saved. They weren't married to nudniks like the other ones were. And they feared the loss of their family, and they perpetuated the family. So I see this as a real striking story of societal immorality and what should be done for it.
Great. Yes, I agree with you as well, right? The idea that sexual violence exists in the society and that it's just accepted, right? That there are certain things in societies, that heinous crimes, things that people turn a blind eye to, that can be the real destruction of a society as well. I completely agree. Okay. Lastly, in the 2 minutes, I just want to put it up there. You have, hopefully everyone has the text. I will put it in the chat one more time for those who came in late. But so let me just do that really quickly before I forget. So you can go home and look at this. I just want us to, I'm just going to read it out loud. I know it's long, but this is the one we read at High Holidays, and we're reading it again this week. And it's worthy of us spending the weekend really digging into and trying to figure out what do we think about this test? Does Abraham pass the test? Does he fail? What is the story trying to teach us, right? Historically, if we want to go back to what Penina was saying earlier, this is a story that differentiates the Jewish people and the monotheists from the other societies at the time that did do child sacrifice, right? And here, a very revolutionary thing happens where Abraham and therefore the Jewish people and the Israelites are differentiating themselves by saying, we are not going to ever do human sacrifice, right? And again, with so much of the Torah, and so it is about how the Jews differentiate themselves from everyone else. So on one level, we can look at that historically. I think on Rosh Hashanah, the reason we read this is not about the historical ramifications, but really about the spiritual and interpersonal elements of this story. So I'm going to read it, and then we'll be out of time, so you can really spend your weekend kind of thinking about this. Not that long ago was High Holidays, so it's still somewhat fresh in our minds. And I'm sure there's a nice reason why we have this as a kind of a reminder. A couple of months after the High Holidays, we're reminded of the same story, as if to try and bring us back to those feelings that we were supposed to be having as we enter a new year at Rosh Hashanah. All right, we've had a few months. We've made it through all those holidays, those fall holidays. Let's be reminded again of some of those high holiday themes. Sometime afterward, God put Abraham to the test, saying to him, Abraham, and he answered, here I am. Take your son, your favored one, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the heights that I will point out to you. So early next morning, Abraham saddled his ass and took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. He split the wood for the burnt offering, and he set out for the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his servants, you stay here with the ass, the boy and I will go up there. We will worship and we will return to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and put it on his son Isaac. He himself took the firestone and the knife, and the 2 walked off together. Then Isaac said to his father Abraham, Father, and he answered, yes, my son. And he said, here are the firestone and the wood, but where is the sheep for the burnt offering? And Abraham said, it is God who will see to the sheep for this burnt offering, my son. And the 2 of them walked on together. They arrived at the place of which God had told him, and Abraham built an altar there. He laid out the wood. He bound his son Isaac. He laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham picked up the knife to slay his son. Then a messenger of Adonai called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. And he answered, here I am. Do not raise your hand against the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your favored one, from me. When Abraham looked up, his eye fell upon a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering in place of his son. And Abraham named that site Adonai Yireh, whence the present saying, on the mount of Adonai there is vision. The messenger of Adonai called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by myself I swear, Adonai declares, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your favored one, I will bestow my blessing upon you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars of heaven and the sands on the seashore, and your descendants shall seize the gates of their foes. All the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your descendants, because you have obeyed my command. Abraham then returned to his servants, and they departed together for Beersheba, and Abraham stayed in Beersheba. Lots of things in that story. Why 3 days? What is he doing on that walk? Did he pass the test? So many questions, many things for you to ponder over the Shabbat. Thank you all very much for all of your insights and thoughts. And I hope you have a wonderful and peaceful and restful Shabbat. So thank you all.
Thank you, Rabbi Joel.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you all.
Shalom.